Hi, welcome back to my channel. It has been a while. I had to take some time away. I was ill, had a horrible cold, throat infection, lost my voice. It's almost back to normal. I do still have a cough though, so we are going to try and get through this video without me coughing up a lung or losing my voice completely. And so this video is... what is this video? This video is my November wrap-up. So these are the books that I read in November. So the first book that I finished in November, I actually started partway through October. And it was It by Stephen King. I am not going to talk a huge amount about this book in this video because I've already made a video. I recorded it just before I got sick, thank goodness. And so if you want to know my full opinion on it, and then go and check out that video. It's linked in the description below. But the basic gist is that I enjoyed it. I thought that it had all of the typical Stephen King aspects that are brilliant and what make his books great. So a fantastic cast of characters, a brilliant location setting. They are the things that make him a great writer. There were things though that I did not enjoy. One was specific characters, in particular Patrick Hockstader. I could have done without him. And a scene that we all know is problematic takes place towards the end of the book in the sewer. I'm not going to go through that now. If you want more detail about it, I do talk about it in the other video. Also, a warning, that video does contain spoilers, so don't yell at me if you didn't want to know what happened. But that was the first book that I finished in November, and it took a while. The next book I read was Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, and this is considered the first, or one of the first, vampire novels. This was written before Dracula, and the thing that sets this apart is that it is very female-centric. It focuses on a female vampire and a female victim. And I think that's why I enjoyed it, because it was different, because it's a completely different perspective to normal. It is obviously a vampire story, so therefore it is very predatory, and the relationship is not entirely consensual. But there is a very subtle, almost romantic element to this book. The problem I had with it though was that it wasn't at all creepy or scary. It is ultimately a gothic novel, so it is very atmospheric. And as I say, I enjoyed the fact that it was based around a female vampire, but it wasn't quite what I was expecting. From having heard about this book for quite a long time, I was expecting more scares and chills and a slightly different vibe, and I didn't quite get it. I enjoyed it, I thought it was a good read. For the time that it was written, it's a very easy read. The language is actually quite modern and it's very, very simple. It doesn't feel like your typical classic novel where it's written in language that's quite difficult to understand. You feel like you need to concentrate and almost have a dictionary to hand to understand what's going on. This has a very different style to it, which makes it a very easy read, and it's very short. It's a very short novella. I think helped make it more enjoyable. But in terms of it being a horror novel, it wasn't quite what I was expecting, especially one about vampires. So the next book I read was Kin by Kealan Patrick Burke, and this was by far my favourite book of the month. I absolutely loved this, and I think it's because I've enjoyed so many of his short stories and novellas that I was really looking forward to reading a more long form piece of work by him, and this did not disappoint. I thought it was fantastic. The basic premise is a group of young people go on a road trip and they get ambushed by a family of homicidal cannibals. So clearly it's not going to end well. And we have one survivor from that group who is rescued and returned to her family. But the book is ultimately about revenge. You have the survivor, but you also have relatives of people who have been killed. And you also have people who live in the town who have basically been terrorised by this family. So there are some very unhappy people in this book. It is not a cheerful story. It is brutal and gruesome and gory and violent, and in places really quite disgusting. Kealan Patrick Burke does not shy away from the cannibal elements of this story. He does not imply things. He does not insinuate. What is happening, what this family are doing, is there on the page. You are reading what they are doing to the people that they kill, and it is grim. The one thing, though, that I will say is that the survivor, we are also told that she was sexually assaulted by this family. The thing that Kealan Patrick Burke does not do is go into graphic detail about how she was assaulted. We're simply told that she was raped, but we are not given explicit, specific details. And that was something that I really appreciated, because I think if it had been another author, they may well have just crossed the line and gone straight into it, and it would have taken it a step too far. This is, as I say, a pretty grim read. If you are of a delicate disposition, if you have a constitution that is not particularly strong, if you are vegetarian, you will definitely not enjoy this book. I'm not entirely sure what it says about me that I think it was absolutely brilliant. There were also elements that were quite humorous, but that is definitely something about this author. He injects humour into nearly all of his stories. And I absolutely love his writing. As I say, the majority of his short stories and novellas I've enjoyed. As with every author, there's the odd one that doesn't quite hit the mark. But to finally read a novel by him, I absolutely loved it. It's by far one of my favourite books of the year. It's definitely my favourite book of the month. The next book that I read was Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. And this was okay, but a little disappointing. For a start, it was way too long. It really could have been cut down quite a bit. The basic plot of this book is that a number of horror writers are invited to stay in what is supposedly a haunted house in order to be interviewed. And it's quite an interesting premise. I really enjoy books about writers, and a book about horror writers is not something that you really get a lot of, but I think that element of it was really done well. We get a glimpse into the different styles of horror, the different approaches that authors take to writing horror, and yeah, having horror writers staying in a haunted house, it kind of seems like an obvious plot, but I don't think it's one that's really been touched upon very much. The problem I had mostly with this book was I did not like how this author wrote women. One in particular was just kind of offensive in that he had gone into great detail about the fact that she had been in an abusive relationship, she'd been a victim of domestic violence, she'd experienced a huge amount of trauma, she was clearly still suffering from some sort of PTSD, and he had that her way of dealing with it was to be incredibly sexual in the way that she dressed and the way that she wrote books. So all of her horror writing was pretty much based around sex. He also had her as a pagan who only wrote naked by candlelight, which, to be completely honest, I think is just lazy. It's a very stereotypical way of writing about people who believe in paganism, who practice paganism. It just didn't sit well with me. There was also an issue of the fact that he really was fat-shaming one of his other characters. Every single description of this man involved talking about how overweight he was, how every part of him was just fat and disgusting, and I just kind of got bored with it. I was reading and just thinking, find another way of describing this character. You know, why do you have to describe him as having fat hands? Why do you have to talk about him in that way? Why can't you just talk about what he is doing and the way he's behaving and who he's talking to? Why do you constantly have to focus in on... It just reached a point where I didn't want to read about that character anymore. In terms of the positives about this book, though, it is very atmospheric. I always love descriptions about haunted houses and have a backstory about who the ghosts are supposed to be and what happened to them and why people think that, you know, a certain place is haunted. And that was done quite well in this book. But there were huge amounts where it just felt very repetitive. It didn't feel like anything was actually happening. The characters were just kind of going back and forth, doing the same thing over and over again, which was a little dull by the end. I thought the very, very ending was clever, and there was a twist, which I didn't see coming, and I thought it was done well. But there was a large chunk in the middle of this that I thought could have been stripped right back, maybe even taken out altogether, just done slightly differently, because I felt myself and skim reading certain points because I just wanted to get through the book quicker. I'd say overall it was an okay read. It was an ideal book to pick up during spooky season, going into this time of year. I just feel like in a couple of months' time, it's one of those where if you were to ask me about it, I probably wouldn't remember what it was about or very much of the plot. So the next book that I read was The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. And unfortunately, this was another slightly disappointing read. I have only read one other book by Grady Hendrix, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And I actually really enjoyed that book. I thought there was a lot of humour in it. I loved the setting, the location, the whole southern vibe to it. This book is very, very different. So this book, we have a group of women who are all the only survivors of massacres that have taken place. And they have all pretty much essentially been used as the inspirations for well-known horror films. But as a group, they come together every now and then as a support group to help each other through it. I thought the premise was genius. I thought just the idea of this book was brilliant. It's not one that I think has really ever been done before. And I was really looking forward to reading this. If you are somebody who really knows your horror films, your slashers, you're a massive fan, you will get all of the references. There are things in here, character names, references in horror films, all sorts of things that you will pick up on. I personally am not somebody who watches a lot of horror films. I'm not a massive fan. I've seen a few slashers, but not a massive amount. I picked up on a few references, probably missed quite a lot, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't detract from getting the book, understanding the plot and the characters and what's happening. So I thought that was a very clever aspect to put in there. The problem I had was I just did not like any of the characters at all. So we have ones who they have cashed in on what happened to them. They have had film franchises made about the massacre that they survived, and they have gone on to be part of the productions of these films, and so they make money. There are others who have had to recover from significant physical injuries, but they've just sort of rebuilt their lives. We have a main character, though, who goes in a very different direction. She becomes absolutely paranoid that the entire world is out to get her and planning to kill her. And so she essentially turns her flat into Fort Knox. She's got, huge security doors. She's got barricades. She has alternative routes that she uses in case she suddenly feels like she's in danger. She has decoy cars. She has all sorts of other things. She has backpacks in random places as emergency packs in case she needs them. But ultimately, she is also one of the most stupid characters. She does things which are just utterly dumb. There is no reason why anybody would ever do some of the things that she does. And I just found a lot of the plot very repetitive. It was her running off to speak to one character and have a go at them about something, and then run off to another character and shout at them about something. And I just wanted to say, okay, come on, give me some action. Because the whole point of the story is that there is a killer who is attempting to bump off all of the members of this support group. And you don't know whether it's one of the previous killers who was after them or whether it's a completely new person. But I just wanted action. I just wanted stuff to happen. And she was just a very whingy, whiny, annoying, self-obsessed, stupid character who I just kind of wanted to get rid of, to be honest. I don't think it would have been a massive hardship if she had been one of the ones to get killed. There were twists in this which I thought were clever. It meant that I didn't fully predict the ending. I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to give spoilers. And I did like that, so it wasn't an obvious plot. It wasn't obvious exactly how this was going to end. But I could have just done with less annoying characters, more action, and a lot more humour. This book just wasn't at all funny or entertaining, which is kind of what you normally expect from a slasher film. Even when people are getting bumped off all over the place, there are still little comedic elements that you expect. And that was missing completely from this book. So then the last book that I started in November actually took me quite a while to finish. I didn't finish it until December, so I'm not going to fully talk about this until my December wrap up. Unfortunately, quite a big book anyway. It's over 950 pages, and getting ill sort of 2/3 of the way through really didn't help because it meant that I just didn't have the energy or the concentration to read more than a few pages a day. And the book is The Terror by Dan Simmons. This is the perfect wintry read. If you want to read something during cold, wintry months, this is the book to do it. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because as I say, I'm going to put that in my December wrap up. So that is today's video. They are the books that I read in November. I unfortunately haven't been able to film at all for the last few weeks, so I did have plans for quite a bit of Christmas content. Unfortunately, that just hasn't happened. So I've probably got 1 or 2 more videos before the end of the year. But let me know in the comments what you read in November. What was your favourite book? What was the perfect wintry read for you? And I shall see you in another video soon.